There was a lot of enthusiasm for this treasure hunt, and initially we had decided on 2 prizes, but thanks to Mr. Raghav Chandra, we increased 1 more, and we have 3 winners who will be given prizes this evening. Murder mystery. This was Begum's Lost Treasure Murder Mystery Hunt, a first of its kind event in Bhopal Lit Fest, and witnessed a lot of enthusiasm yesterday. Titled 108, The Artistic Power and Mystique of India, where Dr. Alka Pandey will be in conversation with Mr. Raghav Chandra. I invite both our distinguished guests onto the stage. Can we welcome them with a round of applause, everybody? And this will also be the Central India launch of Dr. Pandey's work, the 108 Portraits of Indian Culture and Heritage, which is a series of 14 titles presenting an encyclopedic view of India's immeasurable traditional knowledge, each tracing the development and history of a unique discipline that has been explored through the lens of art and aesthetics. Can we shower some appreciation for the Central India book launch? And I would request Ms. Sukrita Paul Kumar and Ms. Poonam Saxena and Niharika ji, the member of Society for Culture and Environment, to formally launch Dr. Pandey's book, Dr. Alka Pandey's book, in the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. The Central India launch of 108, The Artistic Power and Mystique of India, a collection of 14 titles authored by Dr. Alka Pandey. A little more enthusiasm. I know after lunch it's difficult. Launched by Ms. Sukrita Paul Kumar, noted writer, journalist and translator Ms. Poonam Saxena, and theatre personality Niharika ji. Thank you so much. Dr. Alka Pandey, the author of these 14 books, is an art historian who taught art history at Punjab University for 2 decades. She's also taught art and aesthetics at the Delhi College of Art, National Institute of Design, and the DJ Academy of Design, Coimbatore. Her major fields of interest are gender identity and sexuality and traditional arts. Dr. Pandey, under the aegis of the Charles Wallace India Trust, has received several awards, including the Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French government, Australia-India Council Special Award, L'Oreal Paris Femina Women for Design and Arts, Amrita Shergill Samman, Culture Champion and Women of the Year by She Inspires Awards, and Lifetime Achievement Award by CIMA Art Gallery. Welcome, Dr. Pandey. She will be in conversation with Mr. Raghav Chandra, the author of acclaimed novels such as Scent of a Game and Kali's Daughter, and the editor of the Eternal Wisdom of the Tribes. He's also the founder director of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, an IAS officer who retired as the Secretary, Government of India. He's an alumnus of Harvard University, where he was an Edward S. Mason Fellow, dividing his time between the Kennedy School of Government and the Harvard Business School. He's also a professor of practice at IIM Calcutta and founder of advisory firm Consult. And we request our eminent guests to begin the session.
Alka, a very, very warm welcome to you to Bhopal. And yes, with Alka there, it cannot but be working. You know, ladies and gentlemen, art critics and curators play a very, very important role in our lives. And this was what one of my younger colleagues was asking me just now, what do art curators do? They help to interpret, to contextualize, and to promote art. And nobody does that better than Alka Pandey. Some critics feel that the job of the artist is to explore new frontiers, to deepen the mysteries of life through their art, while others feel that the role of the artist is to unravel the mysteries of life and the environment and to make the unknown to be known. That is what makes art so complex, so enticing, so fascinating, so beautiful. It covers practically all senses and all dimensions. And we are going to come to this dimension part, but before that, let's give a big hand to the multi-dimensional Alka Pandey. Alka is one of the foremost art curators in India. I don't know of anybody else who has the kind of multifaceted presence, personality, knowledge, depth, and recognition as she has. It's not very nice to use words like Zarina, like was the word that was used for the time when Pupul Jaikar was there. But certainly, Alka steals the limelight. You go to any embassy show, you go to any major art gallery show, you go to any inaugurations of museum, and Alka is almost always the curator and present there. So once again, Alka, delighted to have you here. She has written many, many books on Indian art. There are about 17 or 18, how many, Alka, books that you've written so far? Overall, if one was to count all your books?
I think about 45.
About 45, sorry. So I'm clearly, I've only done 1/3 of the justice to her as I should have done. Now the current set of books that she's written is called the 108 Portraits of Various Facets of Indian Art. She's covered subjects as diverse as music, craft, printmaking, vernacular and the indigenous, objects in Indian art, textiles, prints, objects, sculptures and whatnot. And I'm absolutely flabbergasted and astounded by the fact that she finds time to do this with all her external presence. Wherever I go, I find her in a place of art, and yet she finds time, ladies and gentlemen, to do 14 such volumes of art books. And each of them has been extremely well written, curated. It's got pictures, it's got first-rate write-ups about that particular topic of art, very well described. She's not left out anything. And these are not encyclopedias of art of that subject. These are synoptic analyses of Indian art through the ages. So they're easy to read, they're easy to comprehend, and perhaps perfect compendiums for anyone's personal library or for any museum or any college or school or place to have. So let me begin, Alka, by asking you, you know, I'm reminded of something I read about the famous Henry Matisse, who said that art is not easy. It takes a lot of courage to do art. And you know, you have a career which spans so many decades in art curation, scholarship, and authorship. Tell us a little about how a young girl from Chandigarh made this very, very decisive leap of faith into the world of art, which was so far held by very, very famous male artists and all, and how did you get into, embark onto this journey? What's been your broad experience before you've carved out this very, very exclusive and niche position for yourself in the world of art and aesthetics?
First and foremost, thank you very much, Raghav, for inviting me and helping me share my work. As a writer, we want to share, we want to communicate. I want to wish all of you a happy Basant Panchami. I've got my little yellow for that. And to my personal goddess, who I worship every day, Ma Saraswati. I'm on her path, and that is my journey. To answer your first question, because I've been sitting with Poonam and Sukrita, and I've always been told, get onto the track. Now, I am a creature of faith, and I believe your journey is already ordained. When I was a young person, I was a sports person, and it is difficult to recognize by my frame that I was a national player for basketball. To which my father, when he got to hear that, he was a government official, and he says, हम राजा महाराजाओं के घर से नहीं हैं कि आप खेल में समय बिताएंगे. You have to do a profession. Because at my age, women either became doctors or you had to join the IAS. That was a big thing in India. I did neither. I became a broadcaster. I started writing. And my father, when I did my, tried to please him, so I joined economic honors in JMC, was a total flop. And I got a 3rd division, if you please. And my father, we are from Nainital, we were in our family house there. And my father says, कौन पहले कुएं इस ताल में कूदेगा, तुम कि मैं? 3 डंडी, इससे अच्छा फेल हो जाते. Well, anyway, life is a curious way of doing things. I was the president of my college, and when you are young, you are arrogant. So I thought, president of JMC, I go straight to Oxford. Then we had a spiritual guru in Vrindavan. Every time I touch his feet, he'd say, Vidushi banogi, saas sasur ki seva karogi. And I hated touching his feet because I never wanted to see a book in my life. And saas sasur at 18, I thought I was the cat's whiskers. So I thought this man, होंगे वो गुरु, but मेरे लिए तो बिल्कुल ठीक नहीं है. My dad got posted to Bombay from Delhi. I had just finished my college. I was working for radio and television. And I went to Bombay, started working for television there, and did a lot of interesting things like interviewing the French president, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, at that time when I was all of 21. But I realized another thing. Even my father's peon was a graduate. After a 2-year gap from my BA, I decided to do my first MA, and that was the love of my life. It was history. I did my first MA, but in those days, as you know, my uncle came to meet me in my hostel in Mumbai. He saw me wearing these fancy, and you won't believe, I was 30 kilos thinner, so you can now believe I was wearing these strappy dresses, tittering on high heels. So he goes back to my father and says, हाथ से निकल गई बेटी आपकी, ठीक है? बंबई में छोड़ दिया, और क्या होगा तुम्हारा जगदीश? 4 बेटियां हैं तुम्हारी, सबसे बड़ी बेटी टेलीविजन में न्यूज़ पढ़ रही है और फेमिना में मॉडल कर रही है, क्या एक ब्राह्मण कन्या. My poor father, he of course would not talk very much because, civil servants know how to keep quiet. My mother was very strong and aggressive. She said, how dare he speak मेरी बेटी के लिए let her do what she wants. So thanks to my mother, I finished my first MA, but they were busy scouting around for a groom. And I get married to a bureaucrat, and from Bombay, I get catapulted into Chandigarh. And it's 81. Grey buildings, grey roads, grey beards. I didn't know a word of Punjabi. I get into my husband's car, the driver says, "Kithe jana hai?" Sajje ki khabbe. I got really worried. I walk into a house from Bombay in my high heels and my slit dress, and it's a 3-floor building. So I look at my husband and say, "Where's the lift?" He said, "Lift? No lift. This is the tallest building in Chandigarh." So that I was out of my comfort zone, having grown up in Delhi and Mumbai. I go to Chandigarh, I take off my high heels, start wearing salwar kameez. That's where I grew so fat, because when you wear trousers, you know what happens. And I've not given up wearing trousers since then. So I joined another MA, which is in the history of art. That changed my life completely. So from a third Dundee, I topped the university.
Fantastic.
So that was my journey of art.
Fantastic. That's a great journey, Alka, very inspiring to a lot of people here who will take the plunge into the world of art, I'm sure, motivated by you. But let me ask you about your book, specifically this figure 108, which you see on this book. And I was intrigued when when you mentioned somewhere that you've done this 108 series, because I've studied mathematics in college, and the number 108 is a very, very prominent number for any mathematician. Apart from the fact that it's extremely, relevant from the point of view of, when a Panditji or a Guruji tells you, 108 bar is mantra ko karna, there's something which resonates about 108. Mathematically, it is 1 plus 0 is, plus 8 is 9. You have 9 planets and 12 houses. You have 27 constellations in 4 directions. Mathematically, it is 1 to the power of 1 multiplied by 2 to the power of 2 multiplied by 3 to the power of 3, which is 9 multiplied by 4, which is, 27 multiplied by 4, which is 108. So it's a very important number. But why did you, as a person in the field of art, think of 108? I'm really curious.
So I'll just go back a little. First, let me answer the 108. 108, because I am really now working in the field of Indian aesthetics. What had happened was that when I going back to the Chandigarh story, I had getting out of my comfort zone, going from the world of broadcast media, print journalism, I actually became an academic. And I started teaching in Punjab University, taught there for 20 years, moved to Delhi because my husband, after I did my postdoc in London, had moved to Delhi, to Jahan Ram, Wahan Ayodhya. I took what you call leave without pay, set up the visual arts, brought the documenta to India, because Goldsmiths College, University of London changed my life. Again, I was in the comfort zone there, out of my comfort zone. And I'll get back to 108, because I have to contextualize the 108. So when I was in Goldsmiths, I decided for my postdoc, because my first book was on the folk instruments and music of Punjab. I had documented the languishing intangible of Punjab. So I started doing this paper called Reading the Performative. I didn't know that performative did not mean performances. The language of art, and I'm talking of 1999, when we didn't have the internet. The internet is not more than 26 years old. So can you imagine, I go to Goldsmiths, where I'm catapulted into what was called gender and sexuality was very big at that time. They were talking of gayness, and I go to this class which is called Reading the Performative, and I didn't understand a word of what was happening. And I had decided to lead a student life, and I was staying at a hall of residence where a Singaporean girl had come with a a dictionary and was studying music at the Laba Institute, which was next to Goldsmiths. And I thought, used to think, look at this, पैसे होते हैं और आ जाते हैं यहाँ dictionary लेके. After I attended that one lecture where I still remember the tutor, Gavin Butt, a gay man who talked about gender fuck. That's the first time I heard that. And I was a very conscientious person sitting right in front, so shocked. We come from a very, a society, in those days, we never used words like that. Then he starts showing me images of images of an artist called Morimura, who, while he was swirling, was showing erect penises. So you can imagine the shock that I had. It was like some Vega. I struggled. I went back to my hostel room, took the dictionary from Bess, first looked up what is the word called trajectories in art and taxonomies. These were the words being used. I only knew of taxonomies and the classification of butterflies. And the girl who was staying in my hostel, when I told her these are words I'm hearing, she says, oh yeah, I'm a dyke. This is my art. So, I was so traumatized, Raghav. I will come to that, but it has to be told the story.
108 is not as important as the contradiction, and I won't say contradiction, the range of, thoughts that you cover from sexuality to the divine. And so in that context, Alka...
it all happened at Goldsmiths.
Yeah, so let me ask you why, because Marc Chagall said that art works for him if it is driven by the heart. And we know that people like Andy Warhol said that you should just create art for art's sake. Just create. And has Indian art, since you've covered the entire history of Indian art through your 14 volumes, does it really always, ancient Indian art, is it always conformist? And have we in India and in our art we've been very, very been very traditional, very correct, so as to say, as per the societal norms? Or have we also deviated, been non-conformist in our arts, surrealist, expressionist, and such like? Or is it very straightforward and simple? What's your sense that you make out of Indian art?
I will answer this question first, but I'm sorry, I will take your permission and go back later to 108. So, in the story of Indian art, if you look at, I divide it into 4 major segments: pre-modern, medieval, modern, and contemporary. So if you look at pre-modern art, in artistic practice, visual interpretation, we have all the canons. In the Chitra Sut of the Vishnu Dharmottar Puran, you have all the canons for painting. How do you polish a surface? What are the colors you use? What is the brush you use? And there's a huge amount of symbolism in that. In the Shilpa Shastras, for sculpture, in the Agama texts, every icon, Panch Dhatu ka banega, kaun si murti Panch Dhatu ki banegi, what should be the measurements in the theory of Shadanga, which is the 6 limbs of art, head, that every figure or aspects of art where there is lavanya, similitude, all these aspects of art are all given. So pre-modern art was canonized, codified. When you come to medieval art, there was a continuity, because in Indian painting, there is a complete unbroken tradition till now. You will see some of the Gond artists here, their work is being used by contemporary artists in their paintings, like Manjeet Bawa used a lot of miniatures, tradition in his flatness of the usage of paint. So there is an unbroken tradition, but medieval also brought in a lot of foreign influences. You had the early Central Asian influences, the influences which came from the court of Shah Tamsap, the Hamza brothers who brought in the miniature tradition. Then when you come into modernity, while there is an unbroken tradition, you know, Indians are known for assimilation, transformation, and transmutations. And that is what happens in art as well. So when you come to modernity, you have a huge amount of the colonial which came in. When photography happened in France and England, it happened almost a year later in India because we were the jewel in the crown. And photographers came to India with their large cameras and started using photography as a tool of documentation. So modernity also, you see a lot of, not just Central Asian, we opened the thing to our colonial masters, and the various art schools which were set up in India, they were part of the crafts and arts movement because the British wanted to have Indians as draftsmen. So therefore, you see the Wood's Dispatch of 1854 and all the first principles of the art schools, they started teaching life studies. They brought in the paint, which you see also with Raja Ravi Varma. Because Indian tradition was the Guru Shishya Parampara. We had ateliers, so it was a received wisdom. Whereas with modernity came another kind of documentation of pedagogy. And modernity is the time when you see the maximum innovation of ideas happening. So till modernity, we had a very specified system of an art education.
So what is the, when do you chronicle the modern period, so as to say?
So modern, I would, in my definition, I would look at modern, because the Indian modernity is very different to any modernity in the world. And in India, in art, we have many modernities. The Bengal modernity is completely different to the Presidency of Chennai, of Madras. The Bombay progressives are absolutely different to what you see in Shantiniketan. So the many modernities that you see in India also have different time periods. But I would look at the modernity of India from the late part of the 18th century to about the early part of the 20th century. Or mid-20th century, and then I come into the contemporary and living artists.
So Alka, you know, since you did mention some of the things that you saw when you were a student, and you know, eroticism is a very, just like divinity is very much a part of your works. Let me qualify that. She does cover the entire gamut of subjects around divinity, the female divine and such like. But eroticism is very much a part of your writing. And you have written specific books like Leela, you've written about Kama Sutra, you've written about spirituality and eroticism, and several of your works are based around that. So where exactly, I mean, is it typically, you know, Indian to have accepted eroticism as a part of life? Or was eroticism something which was a construct which came in with the colonial influence, other than, of course, the Kama Sutra of Vatsayan, which we all take, you know, as a handle or as a peg to say that, you know, India has always been very open, very liberal and such like. But other than that, between the Kama Sutra and the colonial times, were there actually any works which depicted eroticism and which covered eroticism in art?
Well, I'm going to be after the wild women yesterday. I'm going to be absolutely
Yes,
bold.
Arundhati had a lovely session on wild women.
So I'm going to be absolutely bold. So, you know, I've done a big show in Paris at the Pinakothèque in 2014. For 3 months the show ran. It was on the Kama Sutra, but it was called The Spiritual and the Erotic. I have written about 6-7 versions of the Kama Sutra, including a Kama Sutra for women, where people in India, unfortunately, are also uninformed. They think I'm a sex expert, really, believe you me, without even understanding that the Kama Sutra is not a book. It is a compendium. It is a book which has 7 books in it. So you begin with dharma and you end with aphrodisiacs. And if you go back to the epics, particularly the Mahabharata, or you read the Raghuvansh of Kalidas, you see that most of our characters are born out of wedlock. And within the Indian philosophy, within the Indian folkloric tradition, within Indian myths, our gods make love. What is Rati Kriyada? What is Kama? We are so inclusive. You go to Khajuraho, you look at the whole cosmos there. And when you look at the layers, people go there and I hear guides telling such strange stories. But in Khajuraho, it is the universe. And where does the universe start with? It starts with the whole idea of procreation. When you see the stories, one of the curses of Brahma is that he felt the stirrings of desire when he looked at his own daughter. So if you look at Indian philosophy, you look at our myths, you look at our legends, you look at the stories of Hala, which is in the pre-modern period, you look at the poetry which Hala writes. My God, how erotic it is, where the mother-in-law is telling her daughter-in-law about the bite marks on her thigh. So these are things, we've been a very open society, and I would say that it is with the coming of the British, and if you look at the history of sexuality, where they covered piano legs and covered sandwiches, this whole sanitization happened. I would not even say that it was the medieval period, because the maximum number of pleasure albums were created in the medieval period. Between the Kama Sutra and modernity, you have the Koka Shastra, you have the Anangaranga. We are the most wonderful civilization which talks of the spiritual and the erotic. What does the first book of the Kama Sutra say? Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. And all 4 have to be in balance in life. You cannot even become an evolved person till you have not experienced Kama. Some of the best parts of the Kama Sutra have all been written by sages. And in fact, the recorder of it was a celibate sage, Vatsyayan. So I think in the Indian context, the more I read about my traditional literature, the more I read Sanskrit poetry, the more humbled I am by the vision and the power of the thinking of what it is to be Indian.
Fantastic. You know, you've worked with various museums, art galleries, cultural institutions, and you've yourself been a curator now for 3 or 4 decades. How has that influenced your writing? You know, your perceptions, the experiences that you've gained through your visits to various foreign museums, foreign art galleries and such like. And I remember meeting Alka once over lunch, and she said, I'm going off tomorrow to France. So I said, oh, you're curating an exhibition? She said, no, I'm going to just sort of reopen my windows to the outside world and to imbibe what's happening in the world. So how do you take in the experiences that you gain from your outside and external visits, and how do you relate that to your work, and how do you bring that into your work? How does that help you? What have been some of the more prominent experiences that you've had in your visits to art galleries and art museums and such like abroad?
So I think this new word, cross-culture, is very important. And we in India have always been cross-cultural. We've had, associations with Rome, with Pompeii. There's a beautiful Salabhanjika which has been found in Pompeii. So we've always been cross-cultural, and I believe in the power of cross-culture. Again, I will say Goldsmiths 1999 was a big turning point in my life when I stopped chasing the Goras and turned the lens onto Indian aesthetics, and 108. I chased them for a long time. I wanted to be valorized by them, but I worked with a wonderful person called Okwi Envizoa, an a Nigerian, who was the curator for the Documenta 11, and then he became the curator for the Venice Biennale. And he met me in India. We did the Truth and Reconciliation platform at the Habitat, and working with a Nigerian who was from Chicago and based in London, I saw the way they worked. Then there is another person who influenced me greatly, is a person called Sarat Maharaj, who now teaches at Malmo, from South Africa, taught at Goldsmiths, and knows much more about India than you can ever imagine. He is of Indian origin. His aunt was a Swamini, but they left South Africa because of apartheid, but he lives in the Bloomsbury area. Meeting different minds, meeting people. And from 1999, I have not missed a single Biennale till now. Every 2 years, I invest in myself. I go to the Biennale. Every 4 years, I go to the Documenta. Every 10 years, I go to Munster, because that's where the whole city turns into a sculptural city. Just now, I saw this beautiful exhibition on surrealism at the Pompidou, which they call the Beaubourg, and I saw the way they think, and I see the way we think. And, you know, it's very important to be contextual in your own country. That is why I'm a bit bored of contemporary art, because they're being very derivative. But a lot of young people are coming back and creating art and working with Western techniques, Western rationality, but again, focusing the lens onto themselves. So cross-culture is very important.
Indeed, cross-culture is very important, but have you come across, and you know, I need to ask you that because you're possibly the best source for such information. Has Indian art influenced Western art in any way? You know, we've had instances of Rembrandt, for instance, came to the Mughal court and lived here for some years, and several of his, paintings are miniature style, but that was possibly experimental. But has Indian art, you know, and we've had such a vast gamut of art across the spectrum of fields, have we influenced Western art in any major way?
Well, not in the way African art influenced the Impressionists and was more global. That's also because of us. We've had a very low self-esteem in the past, but now we are gaining ground. But you will see a person like Francesco Clemente living in South India, working here, Stephen Cox, who worked with Indian granite, did the building, and worked with Charles Correa. More Indian literature and other aspects of Indian culture are more visible. But if you go to the Biennale, this Biennale had many artists, Indian artists, in their main pavilion, which was lovely. It was not that they were kept away. You had a Monica Correa, you had a Raza, you had a Ram Kumar in their galleries, but I think what is going to change is our indigenous art. That is going to influence the world, because that talks of the wisdom of our forest dwellers. And I think India is now becoming also very visible for what you call foreign artists to take inspiration. A lot of Indians are going and studying in the top art schools, and they are really being sought after for what they bring to the table.
That's very interesting indeed. Just as students who go abroad for any course, one of the essays that they have to write is how you will contribute towards the, the education and the enlightenment of the cohort that you're going to be with. So, since we are living in a very materialistic, money-driven world, so as to say, how important is, we see money driving sport. We find that sportsmen perform better with, now that you have IPL and various other forms of monetization of their talent. How important is the commercial aspect to art and to driving artists to be more creative, because it's not a question of just physical endeavor. Here's a question of intellectual or artistic endeavor, unlike in sports where there is some element of physicality to it. How much is commercialization of art and the high prices that art is commanding, how much is that sort of motivating and driving people to be more creative in this world?
आपने एक बहुत दुखती नब्ज पे हाथ रख दिया मेरे. This is something which is really sad at the moment, because particularly in India, and whenever any society gets rich very quickly, it's happening with African societies where you rise like this and not exponentially. Art has become a commodity. And I think, and I really believe, I go back again to traditional Indic wisdom, जब लक्ष्मी भारी हो जाती है तो सरस्वती को डिवैल्यू कर देती है, which is very unfortunate. And you will see today art is being driven by the market. That is why maximum number of fakes are happening. Try selling a master's today, provenance nahi mil rahi hai, and people are creating for the market. But you know, I'm always a positive person, and I think that samudra manthan ho raha hai. There is a churning which is happening. People are realizing, and I think education is very important. And that is why, because I'm the festival curator for the Times of India, and I have the support of a media house, I am focusing on how to build new collectors, how there can be a fair trade between collection and artistic expression. Because when it's just the market, the first thing which takes a hit is creativity. So now, if you have new collectors who have the confidence to buy not just the blue chips, but support emerging talent, will the country and the artists prosper. You see that in any time, what you call the Belle Epoque, or the golden period in Indian art, which was the Gupta period. What happened? Why was Jahangir such a great patron? Because he called the artists. He saw their work. You need people with expertise. You need people to support young talent. You need to support people who create art for the sake of creativity and art alone, and not have some of the most successful artists are my friends. I don't want to take their names, but unka to kaam banne se pehle they are waiting. They've built buildings, so now they're just creating for the market. But out of them, there are a couple of them who are putting their work back and giving awards to young artists. So, as I told you, Samudra Manthan ho raha hai, and I pray that the all of us are good human beings, और हमारा धर्म जागृत होगा, and we will contribute to society, and we will support young artists through awards. Actually, what we need is regulated, like you have in England, arts council. So if there are good artists who are given work to create, and like the Professor Emeritus, we're not a poor country anymore. So we need nurturing of arts. And let me tell you, artists are the biggest innovators. And I do not like this word soft power, but that is the soft power. And you will see Steve Jobs was an artist. Any IT program is named Isadora after an artist. Artists think out of the box. Artists are team workers. Artists work for the neurodiverse. Just because I'm passionate about art, I'm not just saying it for the sake of saying it, but you look at any country, one of the biggest things which I feel are the public works which have been done by Germany, by creating Documenta post-war. How did they start the process of healing? Through art. And art is the greatest healer. So when you look at artistic expression and support the arts, you are supporting an entire nation.
So if you were to absolutely give her a big hand for that. So if you were to choose and wish to introduce one underrepresented artist, art form, or something about art to the outside world from India, what would you wish to, given the resources, what would you wish to advocate and promote and carry forward? So this says...
I would say the
yes.
folk and the indigenous. I did a book called Jal Jangal Jameen on the art forms of Chhattisgarh. I went to Jagdalpur, I saw the art. I saw even Baiga, the way the women tattoo. You know, the wisdom which is there. The Maua tree, it becomes an emblem of sustenance. From climate change to a sustainable life comes from our forest dwellers. Just run this screen. We don't have time to show it. They'll just see the 108. Just run it. Just run it. While we are talking, people can see it. Yeah?
And you
Yeah.
can rewind it if...
No.
how much time do we have?
I think 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I
So
can
we
see.
I'll just round up. Quick question on the private art museums that are coming up. And, you know, India hardly has any private art museums. We've got barely 3 or 4. One is this photo museum, which has been started in Gurgaon by a college mate of mine,
Yeah.
Aditya Arya. The Kiran Nadar Museum is there. There is the MIPS or this thing in Bangalore. Is that really happening in a big way? Does it require governmental support? Or you think art is so strong in itself that it can happen and, happen on its own? Because I know that the Bangalore person, the Poddars, they said that we don't want any government support and we don't want government to interfere with us at all. We are better off without government interference. Whereas people like Aditya Arya and various others, they do rely on government support in terms of land or whatever. So where does the answer lie, Alka?
एक सरकारी अफसर के साथ बैठी हूँ. You can guillotine me, but I think we need a happy mix of both. We need the public museums because government और सरकार के पास unlimited पैसा होता है. You can't, a private individual, even a Kiran Nadar, cannot have a museum of antiquities. What you see with the Bihar Museum, the National Museum, the state museums, the treasures they have. But what is very interesting is there are very interesting enlightened people like the Hiramet Museum, which has been set up in Alibag, which is of antiquities, which is a single man's vision. These are also very important things, Raghav. So a public-private kind of a parallel trajectory is important. And I think there have to be spaces without government interference because then it becomes propaganda. So you need a happy mix of both.
So Alka, before we end, a couple of rapid fire questions, since that seems to be the flavor of the day. What is your favorite international museum?
The British Museum.
Surprising choice. Because it's got all the treasures from
It's
India
got
and
from
all over the world.
all
and as they say,
over the world.
And as they say that if the British could carry the pyramids away, they would have had them in the British Museum. It's just that they were too big to be carried away.
As they said, as somebody said when I was there and I heard a Punjabi voice saying, "Enu kende chori damal."
And which is your favorite international art gallery?
Art gallery.
Art museum or art,
You mean a private gallery?
Yes, all kinds. Anything that you visited which has been
No,
exceptional?
I love the National Portrait Gallery. Again, I'm very biased towards the UK because I've been colonized by them. I go there a lot and I think sometimes a lot in English. Thank God I don't dream in English. But yes, I also like the Pompidou Center and I like the, the private gallery spaces in the Marais in Paris. I love to walk there and see what is happening. But the other place which I like is Basel, the art fair, where you see the best of the trading of art.
And which is your favorite non-Indian artist?
I think
Across
Van Gogh.
the ages, across the
Van
ages.
Gogh, perhaps.
And your favorite, and this is the difficult one, the favorite Indian artist?
That I will not answer. I don't want to be guillotined and then be or chastised because it's something very personal. But one of the artists I admire a lot, two actually, one is Raza and the other is Hussein. Because Hussein actually caught the pulse of the people. He was a person who looked at literature, who looked at cinema. He was a great marketeer. And the beautiful work, the Zameen work he has done, the kafla that he has done. He's worked with toys. He's worked with materials. And I think he's the greatest showman of them all. So I really enjoy reading. The more I read about him, the more I learn about the way a man has navigated the very dynamic and challenging ecosystem of the arts.
Friends, we've come to the end of this session, and I will end with the famous words of none other than Picasso, who said that art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. Thank you very much, Alka.
Thank you so much.
Do we have time for one or two questions?
Yes, we do. All right. Since you're the first one,
Quick and snappy.
quickly, yes.
नमस्ते मैम, मेरा नाम नम्रता है। मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि आज के दौर में हम देख रहे हैं कि पीवीआर सिनेमाज ही एक चुनौतियों से जूझ रहे हैं। तो हम यहाँ संग्रहालय खोलने की तो बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हम यूथ को या पब्लिक को संग्रहालय जाने के लिए कैसे प्रोत्साहित कर सकते हैं? प्लीज़ उस पर भी ज़रा सा।
जो मैंने अपने एक्सपीरियंस से देखा है, उनको स्कूलों में ले जाना शुरू करना चाहिए, तो आदत सी पड़ जाती है। जब स्कूल में, जब मैं बाहर जाती हूँ, कोई भी म्यूज़ियम में अगर जाती हूँ, वहाँ बच्चे बैठे रहते हैं और वो पेंटिंग के सामने स्केचिंग करते रहते हैं। चलिए 100 बच्चों में सारे बोर हो गए, 2 बच्चे तो देख लेंगे ना, 2 बच्चे तो उसमें से आर्टिस्ट निकल ही जाएंगे। तो जो चीज़ आप देखते जाओगे ना बचपन से, वो कहीं ना कहीं आपके जहन में अटक जाएगा। सो आई थिंक स्कूल से शुरू कर देना चाहिए।
Catch
और
them
अब
young.
हो रहा है।
Catching them young, as they
Yes.
say.
The lady in the pink sari.
या I'll tell you 108 मैं कहानी बताना चाहती थी, अब इनको लगा कि मैं बहुत ज़्यादा, as my friend Poonam said, get on to the track, sometimes I go off the track. So 108 because मैंने बहुत साल पढ़ाया है, पहले पंजाब यूनिवर्सिटी में, फिर मैंने यहाँ कॉलेज ऑफ आर्ट में 10 साल पढ़ाया, एंड आई यूज्ड टू टीच एट NID एंड NIFT, एंड आई सॉ जो हमारे बच्चे हैं, दे आर वेरी डिस्टेंट फ्रॉम इंडियन एस्थेटिक्स, एंड आई फेल्ट इट इज़ वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट कि जो भी चीज़ आप, all the subjects that I have done, they should be looked at from Indian aesthetics and the lens of Indian aesthetics. तो 108 is a sacred number. अक्षरमाला का है, अगर आप 2 inverted triangles देखेंगे, it is 108 energy points. So 108 became a very nice number for me. This book is like an introduction to anybody who loves India or Indian art to get your toes wet. तो 108 एक sacred figure because I believe a lot in spirituality and sacredness. क्योंकि कला जो है वो देव कला है. It is a sacred कला. कुछ भी, चाहे म्यूजिक हो, डांस हो, जब भी आप कला कर रहे हैं, एक कलाकार उस समय एक sacred space पे चला जाता है. So I wanted to use a sacred number.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr.
Let's
Alka
give her a
Pandey.
really big hand.
A very enjoyable and enlightening session indeed. Thank you so much. And I would request Mr. Raghav Chandra to felicitate Dr. Alka Pandey. And I think we can shower some more love and appreciation for such an enlightening session. And as Dr. Pandey rightly said, I think the biggest takeaway being we need to support arts to support the country.